In the first video of this series, I spoke about the role of numbers in consciousness, in particular, the role of the number one. There is only one number, but by adopting infinite possible values, it is able to become so many things, so many thoughts and items of consciousness, including material form, atoms, and so on. There is a domain of existence, for want of a better word, in universal mind based on the concept of the number one. Now, I'm not saying that that is all that there possibly exists in the infinite possibilities of existence or thought or whatever we want to call it. In fact, what it means is that everything that we can conceive of, which can be touched and manifested by the number one, belongs to this domain. And that could include virtually infinite possible states of being, but all of them with that common origin, the number one, or the quality of oneness. Now, that is not to say that there may be other domains or states. Language is so inefficient in this respect. So many other domains or states of being that we cannot describe, or because they are literally inconceivable in ours. So what there is beyond the transcendent and so on is the mystery. But it's enough to be able to deal with the aspects of existence that stem from this particular item of consciousness, the number one. Now, I want to go on in this second part to talk about the consequences of the two states as they appear in two levels of being. Now, one level I call the analogue wave dimension, and the other one I call the quantum digital level. And I shall present some slides to give you some more information about this. Okay, so in the two minds I'm referring to here relate to the two levels of being. So the universe has two principal aspects, the analog wave layer and the quantum digital level. The analog wave level is the magnetic universe. It consists of vibrational processes that shape this virtual reality. And vibrational aspects, I include the wave functions that generate particles of matter and locate them where they need to be in space and time. The quantum digital universe is the electric universe and the information behind the manifestation of particles of matter. We do not inhabit either level of existence, although we both play a part in generating our avatars in virtual reality. So for those who are not up to date on games playing, an avatar is the role in the game that you're playing that represents you. You control it, you use it to experience, but it is not you. So you are not the person you think you are. You are just a representative that your real self uses to manifest on this dimension. We actually exist in this infinite state of oneness or love or the light of active consciousness. But you use the information contained in the quantum information layer to create the illusion of physical existence. So the analog wave dimension supports subjective abstract mind. And that's what we lost access to in the fall. But there is still some usage made of it in our right-brained creative processes, but it's nowhere near what we would have had access to before the fall. The quantum digital mind is predominantly information-based and supports finite objective left-brain thinking. So we lost access to that higher mind with the fall. And that's how we lost any knowledge of who and what we are. And that's why we come into, when we're born into this world, we come as a completely blank slate waiting to be written on. So I don't know when the fall happened, sometime in history, but we have to take the idea of history with a pinch of salt, because it really, the idea of linear time with a past and a future is something of a misnomer. What happens is that we exist in the eternal moment now, and what we do is we create a past that justifies where we are now. Otherwise, it would be totally illogical. There has to be continuity in our stories, because that is how we keep track of what's going on. If we were in a totally abstract and free-thinking, freewheeling state of being, where we don't know what's happening next, but it just manifests spontaneously in the moment, we couldn't handle it. We have this need to have a past, and that past is really a work of fiction, because this state is a dream, a drama, a play, a game, and a classroom. It's all of those things. So at some stage, we were in one world which had these two levels of being in a state of balance. But something happened that caused the two worlds, the one world, to split into two worlds. Now that's created two more or less distinct worlds, versions of the Earth, and they had a big effect in the past, even though the past never happened. I once asked a spirit about time, if they had time. He said, no, we don't have time as you do, but we have sequence. So there is sequence in the story. Now, the higher dimensional world has been known historically by various names as heaven, paradise, or Eden, and it was the home of the gods. The beings from there would come here, and they would say they were gods, or we would regard them as gods, because they had those powers that we'd lost. The power to create, the power to telepathy, all these things. They could do things that we hear about in the stories and mythologies, but we think are impossible for us. But they're only impossible because we've been put in a state where they don't function. The lower dimension became known as hell or Hades or the underworld. And with the actual final fall, that's where we well and truly are. So if you want to know where hell is, you're in it. So here's the diagram I showed before. You can see that where we were on the wavy line between the light and the dark, and we had a foot in both camps. We had a higher state of consciousness in the light and a lower mind, a brain mind in the shadow. And the brain mind was really it was a sense, a sixth sense on top of our other five senses. It wasn't more than that. It was really something that would stop us bumping into the furniture, something that drove us to eat and reproduce and so on, but nothing more. Our real thinking processes were happening in the light, in the subjective mind on the higher dimension. Then came the fall, and there we are. We're in that space on the right. We're in the shadow, and the light that we belong to is taken two processes, two forms, two states. There's the infinite state surrounding us, and the point of light in the center is the, if you like, the source of divine beingness, quality, the quality that makes us what we are. But what we are, as far as we're concerned, exists in the shadow. The shadow is the somnambulistic state, the sleep state. We are largely asleep. We're having this dream. You call it a bad dream, if you like. But in the process, it also became a game. Now, if there were two states, a world where everything was digital or world where everything was analog, then there would be a distinction between the aspects that govern and drive this state of reality. The purpose of existence on the quantum digital level is to do. The purpose on the subjective level is to be. Now, to do means action, and actions have become the action game. Now, another translation of the word action is karma. So that is where the action game came from. It comes with the fall. Now, I'm not going to say that everything we are and do down here comes under the left-hand column, because it doesn't. We also have analog subjective components to our existence, and we are a balance between the two. Now, where we come in that balance depends on our spiritual evolution. Those who are more evolved will have some of the aspects in the right-hand column in various degrees. And well, anyway, if you have a look, you'll see that the consciousness in the lower mind is value-based, and the consciousness in the higher mind is meaning or feeling-based. So you can see some of the consequences. We have limited psychic ability, where those who are in the other dimension would have telepathic, psychic, intuitive abilities, etc. We are individualistic and ego-driven. A higher conscious world would have a collective consciousness, and they would have presence, not ego. Now, this means that on this dimension, we tend to be divisive, whereas on the higher dimension, they would be inclusive. So we tend to doesn't need much excuse for us to be against people. We tend to be against people who are different from us, and for people who are the same. In the higher dimension, people wouldn't make that distinction. Everybody would be included. Our consciousness is superficial, whereas in the higher dimension, it would be deep. We tend to have controlling, authoritarian systems here, whereas in the higher dimension, and any organizational systems that such as they would be in liberating. They would be geared towards freedom. On this dimension, we are competitive, whereas on the higher dimension, they would be cooperative. Here, because of the game, cheating is the very common approach. We've seen it all the time. I mean, just look at the election practices that go on now on the political scene. People on a higher dimension would be naturally honest and diligent, and they would do their best for each other. And on this dimension, everything is value-based, therefore it is money-based, because value has become money. And money means profit. So everything that happens on our dimension is geared towards increasing profit for those who have the distinction of wealth and privilege and power. Whereas on the higher dimension, resources would be commonly shared and they would be gathered or used irresponsibly with an awareness of the environment. So it is the nature of our society to be hierarchical, because quantum digital information adopts a hierarchical entity model, which means that things own other things. So ownership is also a factor here. We are constantly on a war economy, and war is the biggest hurdle to stopping us from progressing and being accepted in the wider community of the galaxy. Whereas on the higher dimension, people would be naturally peaceful and organized in a beneficial way. Here, differences between people are emphasized. So all these things like race and gender are becoming more divisive for no reason whatsoever, because we're not this avatar, this physical form, this being. So whatever physical qualities it has are not significant. It really has no bearing what you look like, what your body's like, what your skin color is, or anything else, because you are just consciousness. Consciousness has no physically identifying features. It's just a state of oneness, of love. So commonality would be recognized on the higher dimension. On this dimension, we are dogma-driven. On the higher dimension, common sense and accumulated wisdom would prevail. So gender inequality, gender balance, I've spoken of. We are emotional, and emotions on this dimension are chaotic and unstable. Whereas on the higher dimension, it is more feeling-based, more detached, stable, and a whole different way of dealing with one another. We are very much attached to our belief systems here. And there's a reason for that. It's because when we stopped understanding who and what we are, we abandoned knowledge and took on belief, because there was a vacuum. We no longer knew anything about the universe and our own natures. So what we did is we substituted that gap with belief systems. Belief systems have very little basis. They're intellectual. They're very suspect. So people on this dimension are radically, racially, religiously, politically polarized, whereas on the higher dimension, people would be spiritually motivated and pragmatic. They would accept things as they are and do their best to work with it. Because of the value-based system and the inequality and the fact that we share resources in a way that is not fair or equitable, we get crime. criminal activity, punishment, whereas there would be no prisons and no crime on the higher dimension. I wouldn't say none, because there's always exceptions, but generally speaking, it wouldn't be like it is here. And here we are possessive about things and people, and we are very possessive of our things we own, what we acquire, what we spend our money on. On a higher dimension, there would be minimal possessions. And the other driving factor here is fashion. Fashion is wasteful, and it's a way of manipulating people to buy things they don't need and to get everybody to look the same, dress the same, by convincing them they're actually being different. And if they're not being different in the right way, then they're not part of the scene. It's all a game. It's all part of the game. So because we've accelerated our development on the lower chakras, the lower sensations, there's much more sexual division here than there would be on the higher dimension. And that is reflecting in what's going on in the woke scene, that people are beginning to realize that there's something wrong with our outlook towards gender, and they're trying to put it right in a way that I would say is not entirely practical, but I can see why it's happening. Relationships on the higher dimension would be much more loving. We are naturally, because of the way that data is organized here, we're hierarchical. That means we are more comfortable being ruled. What we really need is not to be ruled, but to be organized. And we are divisive in the way we use the idea of nations. We divide the world up into countries, and they have wars, borders, problems over who owns what, whereas there would be one world, no geographic distinctions and borders in a political sense on the higher dimension. That does not mean that there wouldn't be differences between areas and cultures. It would be one world, but not one world under a jackboot. At the moment, the pressure on us to form one world is being portrayed as authoritarian, totalitarian, and this is wrong. This is not what we need. We need one world, but one world as a community, not one world being ruled by people who we never know, never meet, never see, but seem to have power over the way we live. And anybody who says anything is likely to get censored. There wouldn't be censorship on the higher dimension. And along with that comes secrecy and spying and control. Whereas the higher dimension, everything would be more transparent, detached, and community focused. Now, part of this is due to the fact that we have what I call quantum time. And quantum time is a different concept from time, the timeless state in the higher dimension. And what it means is when we came into the quantum level, we created death, because quantum time is either on or off. It's a binary time, which means that your timeline doesn't fade away as you decide to withdraw from this existence. There's a termination event, you die. And along with that came aging. I've done my best to explain about the basic nature of consciousness as it originates in the idea of number. And I've missed out a great deal, let me tell you, to go to the idea of two levels of consciousness or being, the analog wave dimension and the quantum digital dimension. Now, the important thing is that we at one time we lived in a state where we embodied both those dimensions, but our primary mind was the higher mind, which was subjective rather than objective, could use telepathy and all sorts of other things. Now, with the fall, which I don't wish to go into in great detail because I don't know a huge amount about it, I can explain roughly what I think happened, but I don't know the historical concept. But they are outlined in the mythology of the race. Now, if we take it to the next stage, at the fall, I believe the world split into two, so that there is a higher world and a lower world. Now, if you look at most of the issues surrounding history and megalithic structures and gods and goddesses, the activity of the beings we called gods, angels, watchers, all sorts of entities who came from the higher dimension to the lower dimension to interfere with it and probably created us in the process. So I've done my best to explain that, and the consequences for humanity of being pushed into this lower dimension where we don't know who we are, what we're doing, or anything. So I hope, and I will go on in the next video, hopefully, to explain how the game works and the role of the idea, the action game, as it's karma, as it's known. Thank you.